The Singapore skyline glittered like broken glass through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Raffles Hotel bar. I was nursing my third whiskey, celebrating the biggest deal of my career, a multi-million-dollar contract that would keep my company's Asian operations running for the next 5 years. My phone buzzed against the marble table, displaying Dana's contact photo, that perfect smile she'd perfected for her investment banking clients. "Hey, honey," I answered, expecting congratulations. Instead, I found myself staring at a FaceTime screen showing my wife flanked by our 2 kids in what looked like a completely unfamiliar living room. "Victor," Dana said, her voice carrying that practiced corporate tone she used when delivering bad news to clients. "We need to talk." Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Behind her, 17-year-old Caleb shifted uncomfortably in his Letterman jacket, while 15-year-old Hope stared at her hands. The room they were in screamed expensive: marble countertops, designer furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking what looked suspiciously like downtown Portland. "Nice place," I said, taking another sip of whiskey. "Whose house are we video calling from?" "It's our house now, Dad," Caleb said, his voice cracking slightly. "We moved while you were gone." The whiskey suddenly tasted like ash. "Moved? What do you mean, moved?" Dana's smile never wavered, but I caught the slight tightening around her eyes. "Victor, we've made some decisions while you've been traveling. The kids and I have relocated to Oregon. We think it's best if we take some time apart." Time apart. I repeated the words slowly, letting them sink in. "You moved our children to another state without telling me." "We tried calling," Hope whispered, finally looking up at the camera. "But you were always in meetings or on planes." That was a lie, and we all knew it. I'd called home every single day for the past 3 weeks, usually getting voicemail or brief, distracted conversations. "Here's the thing, Victor," Dana continued, her banker's mask slipping just enough to show the cold calculation underneath. "Oregon has very favorable custody laws for the primary parent, since I've been handling most of the parenting duties while you've been gallivanting around Asia." "Gallivanting?" The word came out sharper than I intended. Several other hotel guests glanced in my direction. "I've been working, you know, that thing I do to pay for your designer handbags and the kids' private school." "Dad, don't," Caleb said, but his defense sounded half-hearted. Dana's smile turned predatory. "The papers are already filed, Victor. I'm sure your lawyer will be in touch soon. We thought it would be easier to tell you this way, rather than have you served at the airport." I stared at the screen, watching my family, my former family, deliver my execution with the efficiency of a corporate restructuring. The Singapore humidity suddenly felt suffocating, even with the air conditioning. "Well," I said, forcing my own smile, "this is certainly unexpected. I suppose I should congratulate you on the coordination. Very thorough." Dana blinked, clearly expecting more of a reaction. "Victor, I hope we can handle this maturely." "Oh, absolutely," I interrupted, pulling out my laptop with my free hand. "In fact, let me handle something right now while we're all together." My fingers flew across the keyboard as I logged into my email. 3 weeks ago, I'd scanned and uploaded every important document in our home safe to my secure cloud storage. Call it paranoia, or maybe just the habit of a man who'd spent too many years dealing with international contracts and untrustworthy partners. "What are you doing?" Dana asked, her confident tone wavering slightly. "Just sending a quick email to my attorney," I said, attaching the scanned copy of our prenuptial agreement, the one Dana had insisted we sign when her investment banking salary started dwarfing my sales commissions, the one she'd probably assumed was lost in our filing cabinets. "Making sure he has all the relevant documentation." The color drained from Dana's face as she realized what I'd just done. "You can't." That document isn't valid anymore. We've been married 15 years, and the kids are mentioned specifically in Section 12, I finished, along with the jurisdictional clauses in Section 15. Funny how thorough your lawyer was back then. Almost like he knew you might try something like this someday. Caleb looked confused, but Hope was staring at her mother with an expression I'd never seen before. Like she was seeing Dana clearly for the first time. "Dad," Hope said quietly, "we didn't know about any legal stuff. Mom said you'd agreed to this. Did she now?" I took another sip of whiskey, savoring the burn. "Well, sweetheart, your mother has always been very good at managing information. It's what makes her such an excellent banker." Dana's corporate mask was cracking now, revealing something desperate underneath. "Victor, let's not involve the children in this. We can work something out." "Oh, we absolutely will work something out," I said, standing up and walking to the window. The Singapore harbor stretched out below me, filled with massive container ships from around the world. In fact, I'm going to make a call right now to request a permanent transfer to our Singapore office. Seems like a perfect time for a career change. "You can't just run away to Asia," Dana snapped. "Watch me." I ended the call and immediately dialed my regional manager. 20 minutes later, I had a permanent position offer in Singapore, effective immediately. The time zone difference would make communication with Oregon challenging. But it would also make Dana's carefully planned jurisdictional advantage completely meaningless. I sent Dana a text. "Enjoy your new state. I'll send postcards from the future. Literally, I'll be 14 hours ahead." Her response came immediately. "You can't do this." I smiled at my phone and typed back, "Watch me, darling. Oh, and check your email. My lawyer will be in touch about that prenup you thought was gone forever." Then I ordered another whiskey and started planning my next move. 3 months into my new life in Singapore, I'd developed a routine that would have impressed a monk with its discipline and bored him with its predictability. Wake up at 5 a.m., hit the hotel gym, grab coffee from the lobby cafe, and dive into work until the sun set over the harbor. The only variation came in the evenings, when I'd rotate between 3 different expat bars, nursing whiskey and pretending to listen to other displaced Americans complain about the humidity and the local customs. The WhatsApp messages from my kids had dwindled from daily to weekly to sporadic. Hope still sent me pictures of her art projects and school events, but Caleb had gone almost completely silent except for the occasional thanks when I transferred money to his account. Dana's communications came exclusively through lawyers now, each message more desperate than the last, as her Oregon jurisdiction strategy crumbled under the weight of international law. I was scrolling through Hope's latest message, a photo of her at some school dance, looking beautiful and sad in a way that made my chest tight, when my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I hadn't seen in years. "Sal Klein," I answered. "This is either a very good surprise or a very bad one." "Depends on your perspective, Vic," came the gravelly voice of my old college roommate. "Heard through the grapevine that your wife pulled a geographic on you." Sal had been a cop for 20 years before retiring to open a sports bar in Portland. More importantly, he'd maintained his investigative skills and his network of contacts who owed him favors. "News travels fast," I said, settling back in my hotel room chair. "Let me guess. Dana's been making the rounds, telling everyone her version of events." "Oh, she's been busy all right. But here's the thing, Vic. Your wife's been keeping some interesting company lately. Thought you might want to know." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "Go on." "Guy named Mason Price. Works at the same investment firm. About your age. Drives a Tesla. Thinks he's God's gift to women. Ring any bells?" The name sounded familiar. Dana had mentioned a Mason a few times over the past year. New hire, very talented, working closely with her on some big clients. I'd been too busy with my own travel schedule to pay much attention. "How closely are we talking here, Sal?" "Close enough that they've been seen at the Riverside Motel on Highway 26 every Tuesday afternoon for the past 2 months," Close enough that your daughter Hope has been carrying messages between them when Dana thinks it's too risky to text. The hotel room suddenly felt very small. I stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the Singapore skyline. Hope's been what? Kid doesn't know what she's carrying from what I can tell. Thinks she's just helping mom with work stuff. But I got photos, Vic, timestamps, license plates, the whole package. Send them. Already did. Check your email. I opened my laptop and downloaded Sal's files. The photos were grainy but clear enough. Dana's BMW parked next to a silver Tesla at a rundown motel. Dana and a tall, dark-haired man walking into room 237. The same man's hand on Dana's lower back as they walked to their cars an hour later. But it was the last photo that made my pressure spike. Hope, standing in the parking lot of her school, handing a small envelope to the same man. Mason Price was smiling at my 15-year-old daughter like she was his co-conspirator. Snake, I muttered. Gets better, Sal continued. Mason's married, 3 kids, nice house in Lake Oswego. Wife's name is Jennifer, and she's been Dana's friend for about 5 years. They go to the same yoga class. I closed the laptop and walked to my minibar, pulling out a small bottle of bourbon. How long have you known about this? Started digging when I heard about the sudden move. Something didn't smell right. Took me about a week to put the pieces together. Why didn't you call sooner? Because I wanted to make sure I had everything before I ruined your day. Also because I figured you might want to do something about it, and I wanted to give you options. I drained the bourbon in one swallow. What kind of options? The kind that might require you to make a trip back to Portland, soon. I can't just leave Singapore. I've got meetings scheduled. Vic. Sal's voice cut through my objections. Your wife moved your kids to another state, filed for divorce in a jurisdiction she thought would screw you, and she's been using your daughter as a messenger service for her affair. How's that Singapore office going to look when she gets full custody and moves the kids to Europe or something? He was right, and I knew it. Dana was playing a long game, and I'd been reacting instead of anticipating. What do you need from me? I asked. Nothing yet, but there's a parent-teacher conference at the kids' school next Thursday. Both Dana and Mason will be there. Apparently he's been playing stepdad at school events. Might be a good time for a surprise visit from the real father. I was already pulling up airline websites on my phone. Book me a hotel room, Sal. Somewhere with a good view. Already done. And Vic? Bring a good camera. You're going to want to document this. After I hung up, I sat in my hotel room for a long time, staring at the photos Sal had sent. Dana looked happy in them, happier than she'd looked with me in years. Mason looked smug, like a man who thought he'd gotten away with something clever. But it was the photo of Hope that kept drawing my attention. My daughter, unknowingly helping to destroy her own family, smiling because she thought she was being helpful. I booked a flight to Portland, leaving the next morning, and sent Dana a text. Hope's art teacher called. I'll be at the parent conference Thursday, looking forward to meeting all her new friends. Dana's response came back within minutes. That's not necessary. I can handle the school meetings. I smiled and typed back, I'm sure you can, but I wouldn't miss it for the world. Then I started packing. The Portland airport felt smaller than I remembered, or maybe Singapore had just recalibrated my sense of scale. I'd been gone 4 months, but walking through the terminal felt like returning to a previous life, one that belonged to a more naive version of myself. Sal picked me up in his beat-up Ford pickup, looking exactly the same as he had 20 years ago, except for the gray threading through his beard. He'd always had that ex-cop stillness about him, the way he could sit perfectly motionless while his eyes cataloged everything around him. You look like hell, he said by way of greeting. Singapore humidity and hotel food, I replied, throwing my bag in the back. Plus, I've been living on about 4 hours of sleep since you called. Good. Angry looks better on you than that corporate drone thing you had going before. We drove through downtown Portland in comfortable silence, past the food trucks and coffee shops that had multiplied like rabbits since I'd left. The city felt foreign now, like a place I'd visited once on business rather than somewhere I'd lived for 15 years. "Hotels downtown," Sal said, navigating through traffic. "Walking distance from the kids' school and Dana's new place. Speaking of which, you should probably know that the apartment she's renting costs about $4,000 a month. Interesting budget choice for someone claiming financial hardship in divorce papers." "How do you know what she's claiming in divorce papers?" Sal grinned. "I may have a friend who works in the courthouse filing department. Amazing what people will tell you over a beer." The hotel was nicer than I'd expected. One of those boutique places with exposed brick walls and furniture that looked like it belonged in a coffee shop. Sal had booked me a corner room on the 5th floor with windows facing both the school and the direction of Dana's apartment. "Thought you might want to do some reconnaissance," he explained, handing me a pair of binoculars. "School gets out at 3:15. Dana usually picks up Hope, but Mason's been doing the honors lately. Caleb drives himself." I set the binoculars on the windowsill and checked my watch. 2:30. "What's the plan for tonight?" "Parent-teacher conferences start at 6. I'll be in the parking lot with a good camera and a better telephoto lens. You just need to show up and be your charming self." "And if Dana tries to have me removed?" "On what grounds?" "You're still legally the kid's father, and the school has you listed as an emergency contact. She can't do shit except smile and pretend everything's normal." I spent the next few hours reviewing the files Sal had compiled. Mason Price, age 46, divorced once already, worked in commercial real estate before switching to investment banking 3 years ago. His ex-wife had cited irreconcilable differences, but Sal's digging had turned up rumors about inappropriate relationships with clients. More interesting was Mason's financial situation. Despite his flashy car and expensive clothes, he was leveraged to the hilt: mortgage payments on a house he couldn't afford, credit card debt, and a recent loan against his 401k. A man in his position would be very motivated to land a wealthy wife, especially one who was about to receive a significant divorce settlement. At 5:30, I walked the 6 blocks to Jefferson High School, taking my time and enjoying the familiar weight of Portland's autumn air. The parking lot was already filling up with parents in their SUVs and sedans, everyone looking slightly harried and checking their phones. I spotted Dana's BMW immediately. She'd always been predictable about parking in the same general area. What I hadn't expected was to see Mason's Tesla parked right next to it, like they were carpooling to their kids' school events. The audacity was almost impressive. I entered through the main doors and checked in at the reception table, smiling at the volunteer parent who handed me a schedule and a name tag. "Victor Graham," I said. "Hope and Caleb's father." The woman, Mrs. Peterson, according to her own name tag, looked confused. "Oh, I thought, well, Mr. Price usually handles the conferences for Hope." "Mr. Price?" I kept my voice neutral, curious. "I'm not familiar with that name. He's been coming to school events with Mrs. Graham. I just assumed, well, you know how families are these days." "Indeed I do," I said, still smiling. "Where would I find Hope's art teacher?" "Room 237, down the hall and to your left." I thanked her and walked through the crowded hallways, past clusters of parents and teachers engaged in earnest conversations about grade point averages and college preparation. The school smelled exactly like I remembered: floor wax and teenage anxiety. Room 237 was packed with parents admiring student artwork displayed on easels around the classroom. I spotted Hope's pieces immediately. She'd inherited Dana's eye for composition and my stubborn attention to detail. Her paintings were good, really good, and I felt a familiar surge of pride mixed with regret that I'd missed so much of her development. "Mr. Graham!" I turned to find Hope's art teacher, Ms. Rodriguez, approaching with a genuine smile. She was younger than I'd expected, probably early 30s, with paint-stained fingers and the kind of enthusiasm that suggested she actually enjoyed working with teenagers. "Ms. Rodriguez, thank you for calling about Hope's work. These pieces are incredible. She's tremendously talented, the teacher agreed. And she talks about you all the time. I was so excited when I heard you were coming tonight. Were you? That's interesting because I got the impression that someone else has been handling school communications. Ms. Rodriguez looked confused. Well, yes. Mr. Price has been to a few events, but Hope always mentions that her father lives in Singapore now. She's very proud of your international work. Before I could respond, I heard Dana's voice behind me. Victor, what are you doing here? I turned slowly, giving myself time to arrange my expression into something appropriately pleasant. Dana looked good. She'd always cleaned up well for public appearances, but there were stress lines around her eyes that hadn't been there 6 months ago. Standing beside her, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else, was Mason Price. He was taller than he'd appeared in Sal's photos, with the kind of carefully maintained appearance that screamed, trying too hard. His handshake was predictably firm, his smile predictably confident. You must be Victor, he said. Dana's told me so much about you. Has she? I kept my grip just slightly longer than necessary, watching his eyes. That's funny, because she's told me absolutely nothing about you. Dana stepped between us, her banker's smile firmly in place. Victor, this is Mason Price, a colleague from work. Mason, this is my husband. Soon-to-be ex-husband, I corrected gently. Though I understand you've been filling in at school events. That's very helpful of you. Mason's confidence wavered slightly. Just trying to support the kids during a difficult transition. How thoughtful. Tell me, do you have children of your own? 3, he said, then immediately looked like he regretted sharing that information. 3 children, and you still have time to attend school events for someone else's kids. Your wife must be very understanding. The silence that followed was delicious. Dana's smile had frozen into something resembling a grimace, and Mason looked like he was calculating escape routes. Actually, I continued, pulling out my phone, I'd love to meet your wife sometime. What did you say her name was? I didn't, Mason said quickly. Jennifer, Dana said at the same time. I nodded slowly. Jennifer Price? And she's okay with you spending so much time with our family? It's not like that, Mason started, but I held up my hand. Of course not. I'm sure it's all very professional. I turned to Ms. Rodriguez, who had been watching this exchange with the fascination of someone witnessing a car accident in slow motion. Ms. Rodriguez, thank you again for the update on Hope's work. I'll make sure to stay more involved going forward. I shook hands with the teacher, nodded politely to Dana and Mason, and walked out of the classroom. Behind me, I could hear Dana's voice, low and urgent, probably trying to do damage control. I made it halfway to the parking lot before my phone buzzed with a text from Sal. Got everything on camera. You should see the look on their faces. I smiled and typed back, Phase 1 complete. Time for Phase 2. But as I walked back to the hotel, I realized that seeing Dana and Mason together in person had affected me more than I'd expected. It wasn't jealousy exactly. That would have required me to still care about Dana romantically. It was something deeper and more complicated. The realization that my wife had been planning this for months, maybe years, while I'd been completely oblivious. The woman I'd shared a bed with for 15 years had been systematically dismantling our life together, using our daughter as an unwitting accomplice, and I'd been too busy chasing sales targets in foreign countries to notice. But now I was paying attention. And Dana was about to learn the difference between a distracted husband and a focused enemy. The abandoned industrial park on the outskirts of Portland looked like something out of a post-apocalyptic movie. Rusted machinery, broken windows, and weeds growing through cracked concrete. It was also, according to the GPS coordinates I'd sent to Dana, the location of our emergency custody mediation. I'd been planning this moment for 2 weeks, ever since returning from Singapore with a permanent transfer and a very specific agenda. Sal sat in his pickup truck about 50 yards away, camera ready, while I waited beside my rental car in the gathering dusk. Dana arrived first, her BMW looking ridiculously out of place among the industrial decay. She parked cautiously and stepped out, checking her phone and looking around nervously. She'd dressed for a legal meeting, conservative suit, minimal jewelry, the armor of a professional woman trying to maintain control. Mason's Tesla arrived 5 minutes later, followed immediately by a yellow cab carrying Hope and Caleb. I'd insisted the kids be present for this mediation, claiming it was required by Oregon family law. Complete bullshit, of course, but Dana's panic had overridden her usual attention to legal details. "Victor," Dana called out as she approached. "What is this place? Where's the mediator?" "Change of plans," I said, leaning against my car with studied casualness. "I thought we should have a family conversation before involving any more lawyers." Hope ran toward me, and for a moment my resolve wavered. She looked so much like Dana had at that age, all energy and optimism, trusting that the adults in her life would figure things out. Caleb hung back, suspicious and defensive, but he was watching everything with sharp eyes. "Dad, why are we meeting here?" Hope asked. "It's kind of creepy." "Sometimes important conversations require privacy, sweetheart. And this conversation is very important." Mason had positioned himself slightly behind Dana, trying to look supportive while maintaining plausible deniability. He kept checking his watch and glancing toward the exit, clearly uncomfortable with the isolation and the theatrical setting. "Victor, this is ridiculous," Dana said, her professional composure starting to crack. "If you want to discuss custody arrangements, we can do it through proper channels." "Oh, we're definitely going to discuss arrangements," I agreed. "But first, I thought the kids should understand exactly why their family fell apart." I pulled out a manila envelope and removed several photographs, the ones Sal had taken at the Riverside Motel, printed in high resolution and arranged chronologically like a storyboard. "Hope, honey, do you remember running errands for your mom? Delivering envelopes to her work friend, Mr. Price?" Hope nodded, suddenly looking uncertain. "Just work stuff, right, Mom?" Dana's face had gone pale. "Victor, don't do this. Not in front of the children." "Don't do what? Tell the truth?" I held up the first photograph. "This is your mother and Mr. Price at the Riverside Motel on Highway 26. Notice the timestamp, Tuesday, September 15th, the same day you delivered that envelope, Hope." Caleb stepped forward, studying the photograph with the intensity of a detective. "Mom, what's going on?" "It's not what it looks like," Mason said quickly, but his voice lacked conviction. "Really?" I pulled out my phone and played a recorded voicemail. "Because this message from your wife Jennifer suggests otherwise." Jennifer Price's voice filled the evening air, angry and hurt. "Mason, I know about the affair. The kids know too. Don't bother coming home tonight. Or any night." The silence that followed was broken only by the distant sound of traffic on the highway. Hope was staring at her mother with an expression I'd never seen before, disappointment mixed with dawning understanding. "Mom," she whispered, "you told me Dad was the one who wanted the divorce." Dana's composure finally shattered. "Hope, sweetheart, it's complicated. Adult relationships are complicated, and your father—" "Your father," I interrupted, "was working his ass off in Singapore while your mother was planning this entire charade." I pulled out another envelope, this one containing financial records. "Did you know your mom opened 3 separate bank accounts in the past 6 months? Or that she's been transferring money from our joint accounts to pay for that expensive apartment?" Caleb was studying the documents now, his face hardening with each page. At 17, he was old enough to understand the implications of financial manipulation and jurisdictional shopping. "You moved us to Oregon to screw Dad over in the divorce," he said. It wasn't a question. "I moved us to Oregon to give us a fresh start," Dana replied, but her voice sounded hollow even to her. "Bullshit." The word came from Hope, who never swore, never raised her voice, never challenged authority. You lied to us. You made us lie to Dad. Mason chose that moment to try to salvage the situation. Look, everyone's emotions are running high here. Maybe we should all take a step back and… Maybe you should shut up, Caleb said, turning on him with teenage fury. You broke up our family and now you want to give us advice? Caleb, language, Dana said automatically. No, Mom. I'm done with your rules and your lies and your bullshit. Caleb was crying now, angry tears that he wiped away with his sleeve. You destroyed everything and you made us help you do it. I felt a moment of satisfaction, followed immediately by guilt. This was what I'd wanted. Dana exposed, her carefully constructed narrative demolished, the kids seeing her clearly for the first time. But watching my children's world collapse in real time was harder than I'd anticipated. Mason was backing toward his car now, clearly ready to abandon ship. I think I should go. This is a family matter. Oh no, I said, moving to block his path. You're part of this family now, remember? You've been playing stepdad, attending school events, taking my place at dinner tables. Don't leave now when things get interesting. Victor, I never meant for it to happen this way. How did you mean for it to happen? I pulled out my phone again and started recording. Please, explain to my children how you plan to steal their father's life. Mason looked panicked now, glancing between me and the kids and Dana, who was standing frozen in the middle of the concrete wasteland we'd created. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that, I said, my voice carrying across the empty space. You targeted a married woman with money and kids, convinced her to blow up her family, and now you're surprised that it got messy. I walked over to Mason's Tesla and pulled out a key. Not his key, just a random key from my pocket, but he didn't know that. Nice car, I said conversationally. Must be expensive to maintain. Don't, Mason said, but he made no move to stop me as I dragged the key along the driver's side door, leaving a long, deep scratch in the pristine paint. Oops, I said. My mistake. Then I walked around to the passenger side and repeated the action, taking my time, making sure everyone could see exactly what I was doing. Dad, stop, Hope said, but she didn't sound upset. She sounded fascinated. Why should I stop, sweetheart? Mr. Price here helped destroy something that belonged to me. Seems only fair that I return the favor. Mason finally found his courage. I'm calling the police. Go ahead, I said, pulling out Mason's work laptop from the Tesla's back seat. While you're at it, call your boss too. I'm sure he'd love to know about your relationship with a client. Dana's not my client. No, but her company is. And corporate ethics policies are very clear about personal relationships that could compromise professional judgment. I dropped the laptop on the concrete and stepped on it, feeling the screen crack under my weight. There, I said. Now, we're making progress. Dana had been silent through all of this, watching her carefully planned future disintegrate in real time. But now she found her voice. Victor, you're scaring the children. I looked at Hope and Caleb, both of whom were staring at me with expressions I couldn't quite read. Not fear, exactly. Something more like respect mixed with concern. Am I scaring you? I asked them directly. No, Caleb said immediately. You're finally doing something. Hope nodded agreement. Mom scared us more with all the lying. And that, I realized, was the moment I won. Not because I'd humiliated Mason or exposed Dana's affair or destroyed some expensive property. I won because my children were looking at me like I was their father again, instead of some distant figure who sent money from overseas. Here's what's going to happen, I announced to the group. Dana, you're going to withdraw your divorce petition in Oregon and refile in Washington, where we actually lived when this marriage ended. Mason, you're going to disappear from our lives completely. And kids, you're going to decide where you want to live and who you want to live with. based on complete information instead of your mother's carefully edited version of events. "And if we don't agree to your terms?" Dana asked. I smiled and gestured toward Sal's truck, where I could see the telephoto lens glinting in the fading light. "Then tomorrow morning, Jennifer Price gets copies of every photo, every financial record, and every piece of evidence I've compiled about your affair. Your boss gets a detailed report about Mason's ethics violations. The school gets documentation about how you've been using Hope as a messenger service. And Mason's ex-wife gets ammunition for her custody battle that will keep him away from his kids until they're adults." The silence stretched out until Mason broke it with a strangled sob. "You can't do this. I have children too." "So do I," I replied. "The difference is, I'm fighting for mine instead of abandoning them for someone else's wife." Dana was staring at me like she'd never seen me before. "Victor, this isn't you. You're not vindictive." "You're right," I agreed. The old Victor wasn't vindictive. He was trusting and naive and stupid enough to believe that his wife would honor her marriage vows. But that Victor is gone, Dana. You eliminated him when you decided to destroy our family for your own convenience. I walked over to where Hope was standing and put my arm around her shoulders. She leaned into me, and I felt something settle in my chest that had been twisted and painful for months. "The new Victor," I continued, "is much more interesting. He's learned that sometimes you have to burn everything down to see what's really worth saving." Mason was already walking toward his damaged car, probably calculating how much it would cost to repair and whether his insurance would cover vandalism. Dana stood alone in the middle of the concrete wasteland, looking smaller and more fragile than I'd seen her since our wedding day. "Kids," I said, "go get in my car. We're going to dinner, and then we're going to have a long conversation about what happens next." As Hope and Caleb walked away, I turned back to Dana one final time. "For what it's worth," I said, "I would have given you the divorce without a fight if you'd just been honest. If you'd sat down with me and the kids and explained that you weren't happy, that you'd met someone else, that you wanted a different life, I would have been hurt, but I would have respected your choice." Dana's eyes filled with tears. "Victor, But you didn't do that. You chose manipulation and lies and legal maneuvering. You turned our children into weapons and our marriage into a business transaction. So now, instead of an amicable divorce between two adults who grew apart, you get this." I gestured around the abandoned industrial park at the broken laptop and the scratched car and the ruins of whatever future she'd been planning with Mason. "You get exactly what you earned." I walked away without looking back, leaving Dana standing alone among the weeds and broken concrete, finally understanding the difference between winning and deserving to win. The Multnomah Athletic Club's annual charity gala was exactly the kind of event Dana loved. 500 of Portland's most influential people gathered in formal wear to write tax-deductible checks and network over champagne. She'd been planning to attend with Mason, probably using it as an opportunity to debut their relationship publicly now that his divorce was finalized. Instead, she was sitting alone at a table near the back, wearing a black dress that had probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, trying to pretend she wasn't checking her phone every 30 seconds. I watched her from across the ballroom, nursing a whiskey and enjoying the irony. 6 months ago, I would have been the one sitting alone while Dana worked the room, charming potential clients and building her professional network. Now she looked isolated and desperate, like someone who'd miscalculated badly and was still trying to figure out where it all went wrong. "You clean up nice for a guy who's been living in hotel rooms," Sal said, appearing beside me with 2 fresh drinks. "Ready for the grand finale?" "Almost." I checked my watch. 8:30. The speeches would start in 15 minutes, right after the auction concluded. Perfect timing. Hope and Caleb were at a corner table with some of their friends, both of them dressed up and looking more mature than I remembered. Hope had chosen to live with me full-time, while Caleb was splitting his time between both parents, a compromise that seemed to be working for everyone except Dana, who'd lost her primary custody advantage along with her Oregon jurisdiction. The divorce had been finalized 3 weeks ago, with the prenup holding up exactly as I'd expected. Dana got to keep her retirement accounts and her car, while I kept the house, the investments, and most importantly, significant custody time with the kids. Mason had disappeared entirely after his own divorce proceedings began, apparently deciding that a relationship with Dana wasn't worth the professional and personal costs I'd promised to impose. "Ladies and gentlemen," the MC announced from the podium, "before we conclude tonight's festivities, we have a special presentation from one of our community members who's recently returned from an extended international assignment." I smiled and finished my whiskey. Sal had used his connections to get me added to the program at the last minute, ostensibly to talk about my experiences working in Singapore and the importance of international business relationships. The event organizers had been thrilled to add someone with my corporate credentials to their speaker lineup. What they didn't know was that I had a different presentation in mind. I walked to the podium through scattered applause, noting Dana's expression of confusion and growing alarm as she realized what was happening. She started to stand, probably planning to leave, but the crowd was too thick and the exits too far away. "Thank you," I said into the microphone, my voice carrying clearly through the ballroom's sound system. "It's wonderful to be back in Portland after spending several months in Asia. International travel gives you perspective on a lot of things: business practices, cultural differences, and especially the importance of trust in professional and personal relationships." Polite murmurs of agreement from the audience. I could see Dana frozen in her chair, trapped between social expectations and personal panic. During my time overseas, I learned some valuable lessons about due diligence. In business, we call it trust but verify. The idea that you should always confirm what people tell you, especially when the stakes are high. I clicked to my first slide, which showed a generic corporate logo and some meaningless business statistics. Standard presentation material that would bore the audience into complacency. For example, when someone tells you they're working late, it's worth verifying that they're actually at the office. When someone claims they need to relocate for better opportunities, it's worth checking whether those opportunities actually exist. Dana was frantically texting someone, probably her lawyer, though I doubted there was much legal recourse for being humiliated at a charity event. And when someone insists that a business relationship is purely professional, well, I clicked to the next slide, which showed the exterior of the Riverside Motel. It's worth investigating what kind of business requires weekly meetings at budget accommodations. A ripple of uncomfortable laughter went through the audience. People were starting to pay attention now, sensing that this wasn't a standard corporate presentation. "The thing about trust," I continued, "is that once it's broken, it's very difficult to repair. In business, we have contracts and legal remedies. In personal relationships, the consequences can be much more creative." I clicked to a slide showing financial records, bank statements, credit card bills, real estate transactions, all legally obtained through the divorce proceedings, all properly redacted to protect account numbers, but detailed enough to tell a clear story. For instance, when someone claims financial hardship while simultaneously spending $4,000 a month on luxury apartments and expensive dinners at romantic restaurants, it raises questions about their credibility. Dana had given up on texting and was now staring at me with undisguised horror. Around her, other guests were starting to whisper and point, recognizing her from the financial data on the screen. "But the most valuable lesson I learned overseas," I said, advancing to a slide that showed a timeline of events, "is that revenge is a dish best served with proper documentation." The timeline laid out everything: the affair, the secret relocation, the jurisdictional manipulation, the use of our daughter as an unwitting messenger service. Names were redacted, but anyone who knew our family would recognize the players immediately. "In conclusion," I said, returning to a slide with generic corporate messaging. I'd like to thank everyone who supported me during my recent career transition. Special thanks to my private investigator, my attorney, and my children who helped me understand the difference between being a victim and being a volunteer. I paused and looked directly at Dana, who was now crying silently while the people around her pretended not to notice. Sometimes the best business decision is knowing when to cut your losses and start over. Thank you. The applause was scattered and confused, but I didn't care. I'd accomplished what I came here to do: publicly destroy Dana's reputation among the people whose opinions she valued most. As I walked back to my table, I passed close enough to Dana to speak quietly without the microphone picking up my words. "You wanted a new life," I whispered. "Enjoy the one you've earned." I handed her an envelope, not the fake DNA results I'd threatened her with months ago, but something much more devastating: copies of the emails between Mason and his ex-wife, detailing how they'd planned to use Dana as a convenient scapegoat for his own marital problems. Dana opened the envelope with shaking hands and read the first page, her face going white as she realized that she'd been played just as thoroughly as she'd tried to play me. "He never loved you," I said, loud enough for the people at nearby tables to hear. "You were just a convenient exit strategy from his first marriage. Congratulations on being someone's stepping stone." I walked away without looking back, leaving Dana alone with the wreckage of her reputation and the knowledge that she'd destroyed her family for a man who'd been using her from the beginning. Hope and Caleb were waiting for me at our table, both of them looking proud and slightly awed. "Dad," Hope said quietly, "that was brutal." "Yes, it was," I agreed, sitting down and signaling the waiter for another whiskey. "Sometimes brutal is what people earn." Caleb was staring across the room at his mother, who was gathering her purse and preparing to leave through a gauntlet of whispers and pointed stares. "Do you feel bad for her?" he asked. I considered the question seriously. "I feel bad for the woman I married 15 years ago, but that woman gone somewhere along the way, replaced by someone who thought she could manipulate and lie her way to happiness. I don't feel bad for that person at all." "Good," Hope said firmly, "because she didn't feel bad for us when she was tearing our family apart." We sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching the other guests gradually return to their conversations and charity auctions. The excitement of my presentation was already fading into gossip and speculation, but the damage was done. Dana's professional and social reputation in Portland was finished. "So what happens now?" Caleb asked. I smiled and raised my glass in a mock toast. "Now we go home and figure out how to be a family again, just the three of us." "What about Mason?" Hope asked. "What about him? He's Jennifer's problem now, and from what I hear, she's much better at revenge than your mother ever was." As we prepared to leave, I caught sight of Dana one final time, standing alone by the coat check while other guests gave her a wide berth. She looked broken and defeated, like someone who'd gambled everything on a sure thing and lost it all. For just a moment, I felt something that might have been pity. Then I remembered Hope carrying messages for her mother's affair, Caleb's angry tears in that industrial park, and the months of lies and manipulation that had preceded this moment. They thought they'd written my ending, I reflected, watching Dana disappear into the Portland night. Turns out, I was the author all along,